I still remember sitting in a bar when I overheard two women talking at the table behind me. One of them said, "It's like he just doesn't care if I stay or leave." And I can't stop thinking about him. Her voice cracked somewhere between rage and obsession. The other woman laughed nervously and said, "Girl, you're addicted." That word hit me hard. Not in love, not into him. Addicted. She was addicted to a man who didn't need her, and you could hear the confusion in her voice. Because nothing in her life had prepared her for that kind of man. Every guy before had begged, explained, apologized, adjusted, overextended. But this one he was ready to walk. Not as a threat, not as a tactic, just truth. He would walk if he had to. And that made him magnetic. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to become that kind of man, because once you are, you'll never chase again. You've been lied to about what keeps a woman. You think it's kindness, or emotional transparency, or consistency. But those are just wrappers. What actually hooks her? What makes her lose sleep, pace the floor, read too deep into every text is your capacity to walk away. Not because you're playing a game, but because you have something she can never fully own, your self-possession. You don't orbit her. You don't revolve your soul around her moods. You move from your own axis. And that, in a world of approval-starved men, drives her insane. Because if she can't fully claim you, she has to chase the mystery. Women chase what feels just out of reach. And the second you fear losing her, you hand her the power. She might smile politely, but inside, the craving dies. She wants the man who chooses her, not the one who needs her. That difference is everything. You can love her deeply, want her naked and laughing in your bed, want her eyes on you, her secrets in your ear. But the moment your core becomes dependent on her return, the dynamic shifts. She becomes the sun, and you become a planet, spinning, burning, begging for heat, and she'll test you. Not always consciously, okay, but some part of her needs to know, will he crumble if I leave? Will he become the man who sends 3 messages in a row and checks when I was last online? Will he bleed in my hands, then ask me to sew him back up? Or will he vanish into his purpose without a sound, forcing me to wonder if I ever meant anything at all? The moment you stop fearing loss is the moment she starts fearing yours. That's the reversal. She senses it like scent in the air. She studies you for cracks. Women are masters of emotional x-rays. They can tell if your confidence is real or rehearsed. And if you're just pretending not to care, they'll expose you in seconds. But if your indifference comes from depth, if it's rooted in something bigger than her, she will feel it like gravity. Because you're not being cold. You're being centered, unshakable. And that scares her, excites her, pulls her in like a tide. You've been trained to think that walking away is weakness, that it's failure, that staying, enduring, fixing, proving those are the virtues of a real man. But if your presence becomes self-erasure, it's not virtue, it's slow suicide. You're not her savior. You're not her therapist. You're not her emotional sponge. You're a man. And a man who knows his worth walks when his values are on the line. Not dramatically, not angrily, just decisively. Because nothing inside him begs to be completed. He is already whole. And that wholeness is what keeps her up at night. She might say, "Why are you so distant?" But what she really means is, "Why can't I control you?" She might accuse you of not caring, but it's because she's scared that she cares more. She's addicted to the possibility that you might leave and never look back. And it's not because she's broken. It's because that tension lights something ancient inside her, the chase for the man she cannot tame. And here's the brutal part: if you become easy to win, she will unconsciously look for ways to lose you. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because the spell breaks when she owns you fully. The best sex she ever has won't be with the man who tells her, "I'd die without you." It'll be with the man whose silence after a fight says, "I could disappear tonight and be just fine." Not because he's cruel, but because he's not dependent. And that difference, that's what turns desire into obsession. She starts seeing you in every room, every song, wondering if you've already moved on. And the truth is, maybe you have. Maybe you're out living, breathing, building. Because while she's spiraling in memory, You're not paralyzed. You're free. And freedom is your leverage. You're not here to be her emotional pet. You're not here to beg for closeness like a child denied affection. You're here to live with depth. And if she aligns with that path, good. If not, you don't stall. You don't shrink. You don't explain. You leave. Not to hurt. Not to teach. Just to stay true. And she will feel the sting of your absence more than 1,000 words could ever deliver. The absence of a man who meant what he said. The absence of a man who won't be summoned back by guilt, or longing, or nostalgia. She gets addicted not to you, but to the loss of you. To the echo you leave when you vanish without needing her reaction. That's what haunts her. That's what no other man gave her. That moment where she realizes he was real. And I might never see him again. You never yell. You never plead. You never throw your heart onto the floor and ask her to step carefully. You just walk when you need to. Not as a threat. As a habit. As a creed. Because the truth is, she never stops testing you. Not in the manipulative way weak men complain about, but in the ancient way. The instinctual way. The way her nervous system is wired to feel for strength. She pokes at your patience, your self-respect, your backbone. Not because she wants to destroy them, but because she needs to feel them. Like a blindfolded woman searching in the dark, trying to find the walls of a structure that won't collapse if she leans too hard. And if you flinch at every tremor, if you melt under her moods, if you stay when your dignity is cracking just to keep the warmth of her body at night, she will see it. She will lose respect. She will call it kindness to your face and quietly lose desire. But if you leave when the boundary is crossed not coldly, not cruelly, but calmly, with a clean cut, you become the one man her memory can't shake because you did what no one else dared. You valued yourself more than her approval. You looked her beauty in the face and still chose distance over disrespect. There is nothing more attractive to a woman than a man she cannot emotionally enslave. Not because she's evil, not because she wants to dominate, but because it awakens the deepest feminine instinct to submit to power she can trust. Not control, trust. And if your love comes with an escape hatch, with a silence that says, I don't need to be here, then every time she chooses you again, it's real. Not need, not dependence, but choice. And the only kind of love worth having is the kind that survives freedom. You're not born with this. You earn it, you forge it, you suffer your way into it. Because if you're like most men, you learned early that staying wins. That the longer you endure, the more likely she'll love you. That showing you care more, louder, faster will convince her to stay. But that only works in movies. In reality, your obsession smothers her intuition. She doesn't feel you anymore. You're too available. Too obvious. There's no signal in the noise, and so she leaves. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were too much of the wrong thing. You were addicted to her presence. And addiction is always unattractive. She gets addicted when you're not. When your peace doesn't depend on her next sentence. When your silence doesn't beg for explanation. When your eyes don't flinch. Even as she storms out, she'll check her phone 10 times an hour after she walks away, wondering why you haven't begged. She'll relive the last thing you said, trying to decode whether you're gone for good. And in that gap between your calm exit and her chaotic memory, she starts to feel, not just for you, for herself. Because your departure holds up a mirror. And suddenly she's alone with what she tried to escape herself. The man who stays no matter what isn't romantic. He's forgettable. But the man who walks when the soul says walk, he becomes legend. Her friends talk about him years later. Her future lovers are compared to him without knowing. He leaves a scar that doesn't bleed but also never closes. Because he never tried to own her. He never tried to convince. He just was. And then he wasn't. And the space he left behind keeps whispering. Even in silence. You don't have to be rich, or famous, or muscular. You just have to be sovereign. A man who doesn't bargain with his self-worth. A man who could love deeply, wildly, unconditionally, but never blindly. And here's the paradox. The more ready you are to leave, the harder it is for her to let you go. Because you don't need her. and that makes you a mystery. And the feminine is drawn to mystery like flame to air. She doesn't want your dependence. She wants your attention, but only when it's earned. She wants to be chosen, not needed. To feel your gaze, not your grasp. She wants to sense your desire, not your desperation, because desperation kills erotic tension. It says, "I'm nothing without you," and that is the death of polarity. But a man who can look her in the eye, burn for her, and still walk away if his soul says no, that's the man she aches for when the room goes quiet. She may not even know why. She'll cry and call it heartbreak. She'll vent to her friends, scroll through your old messages, stare at your last seen timestamp. But what she's really feeling is withdrawal. Not from a man, but from the feeling of being pulled towards something she couldn't control. And that's the most potent chemistry there is. Not when she knows you love her, but when she knows you love her and would still walk away if she stopped being true to you. This is the line most men fear to cross. The line where you stop trying to be safe. The line where you risk losing her. Not to win a game, but to keep your soul intact. And yes, it will scare you. It might tear something inside you. You'll feel the tremble of letting go. But once you've done it once you've walked away not from hate, but from honor, you'll never go back. Because you'll realize you don't just attract women this way. You attract yourself. The man you were meant to be. The man who doesn't flinch. The man who doesn't explain. The man who disappears without burning down the room. Because silence is louder than screams. And that silence. That's the sound she'll hear when her head hits the pillow at 2 long after the texts have stopped. It'll echo like a heartbeat she can't match. Not because you're gone, but because you're beyond reach. There's a moment she'll never admit the one right after you leave. She won't tell her friends. She won't tell her next boyfriend. But deep down, buried under pride and rationalizations, is the shock. The disbelief that you didn't beg. That you didn't try one more time. That you just let her go. That silence isn't passive, it's thunder. It's what stays behind after the door closes. And while she's convincing herself that he didn't really care, she's rereading the last thing you said, wondering how someone could care that much. And still walk. It's because you weren't there to be her pet, or her project, or her emotional pillow. You were there as a man, someone with breath in his lungs and fire in his eyes, someone who would give everything except his dignity. And she felt that every woman feels it. They might never say it, but they know which men will crack under pressure and which men will not. The ones who crack are everywhere. You see them in restaurants, nodding like trained dogs while she talks down to them. You see them online, pouring out paragraphs into voids that never answer back. You see them walking on eggshells, rewriting their personalities, losing the edge that once made them dangerous. They shrink into shadows just to stay. They hand over their spine just to hold her hand. And they wonder why she pulls away. She's not evil. She's just wired for polarity. And polarity dies when a man becomes predictable. The more you explain, the more she detaches. The more you justify, the more she withdraws. And every time you try to buy back her attention with softness you haven't earned, you cheapen yourself until you're no longer a presence but a plea, something that waits, something that apologizes for existing, something easy to delete. But the man who isn't afraid to leave, he is unforgettable. Because he doesn't rely on performance. He relies on principle. He doesn't need her to understand. He needs to stay true. And when that becomes your compass, everything shifts. Conversations change. Posture changes. Eye contact deepens. You say less, but every word lands like steel. Because you're not speaking to win. You're speaking from core. This doesn't mean you don't feel. You do. Deeply. You love fiercely, anyway. You ache. You hope. But you never crawl. You never kneel for affection. You never beg someone to stay when their soul is already halfway out the door. You stand. You love. And when it's time, you leave. And that departure cuts cleaner than rage ever could. Sometimes the most masculine thing you can do is vanish. Without warning. Without ceremony. Just exit. Because something in you knows it's time. That there's no fixing what's already drowned. That her games no longer grip you. That her silence doesn't freeze you? That her tears no longer distort your judgment? Not because you're heartless, but because you've been here before. And the man who has suffered and survived doesn't flinch at storms. He sails through them. That's what she senses. The calm beneath your intensity. The storm you don't unleash. And it drives her mad in the most primitive way, because she wants to see if you'll bend, if you'll finally collapse into her lap and ask to be mothered. But when you don't, when you stay composed through the chaos, she softens. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but eventually, the contrast gets to her. The space where you used to be becomes unbearable. And the more she thinks about filling it with someone else, the more obvious it becomes there's no replacing the man who wasn't afraid to lose her. You become a ghost she can't exorcise. Not because you haunt her, but because you didn't leave a trace of desperation. No drunk messages. No Instagram likes at 3 a.m. No reaction when she posts something meant to hurt you. Nothing. Just distance. Just strength. Just quiet. She might try to recreate you, mold the next man into your silhouette. But it won't work, because she can't manufacture presence. She can't replicate the feeling of being seen by a man who doesn't need her to stay, and eventually, she stops comparing. Not because she's over you, but because comparison is too painful. It reminds her what she had and lost not by accident, but by her own hand. And maybe she'll try to come back. Not always directly, sometimes through nostalgia, sometimes through silence, sometimes through curiosity disguised as kindness. But you'll know, and in that moment, the weak man forgives too fast. He leaps at the chance. He tells himself this is fate. He thinks love has returned. But the man who isn't afraid to leave, he doesn't move until he knows. He doesn't entertain, maybe. He doesn't chase ghosts. He waits. And if she's real, she'll prove it with action. Not words, but you don't need her to come back. That's the power. That's what breaks the cycle. You're not standing still hoping she returns. You're building, evolving, living. You're not trying to make her jealous, you're just already gone. And no tactic competes with authenticity. When you become the man who doesn't need her love, her respect grows. When you walk without a flinch, her obsession ignites. Not because you manipulated her, but because you showed her what she truly craves, a man she can't control. A man she can trust because he answers to something greater than her, his own code. Your code is everything. And once you've written it in pain, no woman can rewrite it with pleasure. You stop chasing the next high. You stop asking what she wants. You already know who you are, and that's the rarest thing in the world. Most men bend. They bend for beauty. They bend for softness. They bend for a glimpse of approval. But the man who doesn't bend becomes the mountain. And women don't forget the mountain. They remember the weight of your presence, like the way you didn't fold under pressure, the way your goodbye came without ceremony, without begging, without drama. Just a clean silence that said, I don't need you to understand. I need me to stay whole. And even if she doesn't understand it now, she will. Because a woman doesn't mourn the man who stayed too long, she mourns the one who disappeared without looking back. And maybe one day she'll admit it. Maybe in a conversation years from now. Maybe to a friend. Maybe just in her own thoughts. There was this guy once, I thought I had him. But he left. Just like that. I never heard from him again. And there'll be a pause. A flicker in her voice. Because she'll feel it all over again. The loss of someone she couldn't control. Someone who didn't need the closure. Someone who didn't need to prove a point. Someone who just vanished with dignity. That man, that's you. If you choose it, you don't win her by being nice. You don't win her by staying when you should have walked. You don't win her by tolerating disrespect, silence, manipulation, or hot and cold chaos. You win her respect by being the man she knows she can't play. The man who listens but doesn't waver. Who gives but doesn't submit. Who loves but doesn't kneel. The truth is brutal. She's not wired to love the man she can control. She's wired to love the man she can feel. And nothing makes her feel more than the risk of losing you. Not because you're a narcissist, not because you're cold, but because you are rare. You are the one who is able to leave. And every time you show her that without anger, without guilt trips, without noise, you remind her why she fell for you in the first place. So stop explaining yourself. Stop asking what went wrong. Stop rehearsing the perfect message to send at 1A. She felt everything you did, and she still walked. Let that be enough. Let her go, and then let yourself become. Not to win her back, not to prove her wrong, but because your soul deserves more than crawling through broken glass just to taste her warmth again. You walk and then you build, brick by brick, habit by habit. Boundaries become sharper, words become fewer, vision becomes clearer. You move like a man who knows he could lose any woman at any moment and still not lose himself. And when that happens, they feel it. Every woman you meet from that point on will feel it. They'll test it. They'll press your edges. But it won't break you, because you've already stood alone before. You've already watched her leave, and you didn't die. You woke up stronger, clearer, hungrier. Not for her, but for truth, for alignment, for a life that no longer contorts around approval. And that's the final piece, the part no one tells you. Once you become this man, not in theory, but in your bones, you no longer ask, how do I get her back? Because you've already moved past her frequency. You've outgrown the part of you that needed her love to feel real. You're not interested in being worshipped. You're interested in being recognized. And if she can't see you without her games, her moods, her punishment, you'd rather be alone. Not bitter, not angry, just firm. You've been too soft for too long. Soft with your words, soft with your energy, soft with your standards. And she saw it, felt it, exploited it even if she didn't mean to. Because the feminine tests the softness of a man to see if it can harden into leadership. And if it doesn't, she retreats. She smiles. But the respect dies. And when the respect dies, the desire follows. Every time. So what do? You become unshakable. Not by force, not by pretending, but by getting so intimate with yourself that nothing she does can shake you. She can leave. She can ghost. She can mock. She can beg. But your center remains. You're not numb. You're not detached. You're just rooted. And when a man is rooted, he's irresistible. Not because of what he gives her, but because of what he withholds his dependence. That's the edge. That's the addiction. She's not addicted to your love. She's addicted to your wholeness. To the part of you that cannot be touched, even by her most beautiful smile. She wants to reach it, taste it, own it, but she can't. And that's what keeps her coming back. That's what makes her stare at the ceiling at night and wonder, why can't I forget him? Because you left and you meant it. Because you're not afraid to be alone. Because your silence said what 1,000 love songs couldn't. Because your absence taught her what your presence never could. And now she has to live with the truth she had a real man in her hands. And she thought he would always be there.